Hello and welcome to the recorded presentation for the Westwood Boulevard Safety and Mobility Project. Today we will go over the project status as of December 2025. We will go over the overview and goals for this project, talk a little bit about the Westwood project scope, and the engagement strategies and next steps for this project. Let's begin with the overview and goals. This project has three main goals. These are common goals that LADOT has for many of our projects throughout the city. First and foremost, we want to address traffic safety concerns on Westwood Boulevard. Number two, we want to improve first and last mile access to public transportation, especially to the E Line metro station at Westwood and Exposition, and the upcoming D Line subway station at Westwood and Wilshire. And lastly, we want to enhance the community connectivity of Westwood and reduce barriers to travel. There are three main documents that guide this project. On the left is our Mobility Plan 2035. Passed in 2016, this is part of our general plan. This is the transportation element, and it describes citywide transportation policy goals as well as our goals for different transportation networks across the city, including where we want to install bike lanes, bus lanes, pedestrian improvements, and the like. In the middle is the West Side Cities Council of Governments Mobility Study. This was adopted in 2020, and it is a product of the West Side Cities Council of Governments, which is a organization that represents the different jurisdictions on the west side of Los Angeles. This mobility study used data and community input to identify uh, streets that are of high priority for upgrades and investments into infrastructure. This study highlighted Westwood Boulevard as a high priority for bike improvements and therefore qualified us for a grant, which is helping to pay for this project. And then lastly, on the right is the Purple Line Extension First Last Mile Plan. This is a document by LA Metro, also created with lots of community input. This highlights specific recommendations for infrastructure around new station areas. In particular for this project, this recommends elements around the Westwood and Wilshire D-Line station that is coming soon. Now let's move on to the Westwood Boulevard project itself. So here on the right, you can see a map of the project extents. This project will go from LeConte Avenue at UCLA campus down south to Exposition Boulevard at the Metro E-Line station. This is a 2.3-mile project. We have received grant funding of $9.6 million. We've been in conversation with the council office in this area, and they are very supportive of improvements on Westwood Boulevard. This project will include bus, bike, and pedestrian improvements. And as part of this project, we will be implementing the mobility plan. However, the mobility plan has some confusing designations on this stretch of Westwood Boulevard, which we will break down in a couple of slides. Lastly, I wanted to mention some other nearby projects that interact with this project. LADOT is proposing a project on Ohio Avenue. This project is proposed to be a two-way protected bike lane. If you're interested in learning more, please go onto our website, LADOT Livable Streets, to find out more. Caltrans, the state transportation agency, is starting a project to install bus lanes on Santa Monica Boulevard. While it doesn't connect directly to Westwood Boulevard, it's good to know that this project is happening in the area. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, safety is our number one priority, and we want to address the safety concerns on Westwood Boulevard. In the last 10 years, there have been 354 collisions on Westwood Boulevard. 106 of those collisions have involved pedestrians or cyclists, making up about 30% of all the collisions. There have been 16 collisions which have resulted in fatal or severe injuries, also known as KSI, involving pedestrians or cyclists. 88.8% of all KSIs have involved a pedestrian or cyclist on Westwood Boulevard. It is designated on the high injury network between LeConte Avenue and Pico Boulevard. Streets on the high injury network are part of the 6% of city streets where 70% of pedestrian and cyclist KSIs happen. Our goal is to address these most dangerous streets and reduce the amount of KSIs significantly. In case you're not familiar with Westwood Boulevard, I'd like to show you some of the existing conditions of the street. On the left is an image of the Westwood and Wilshire intersection. This is the future location of the D line station. There are some wide, unprotected crossings for pedestrians, which means that they spend a lot of time crossing the street and are vulnerable to traffic. On the right is an image of a cyclist going down Westwood. As it exists today, is a confusing situation for both bike riders and drivers. There are some bike lanes on Westwood Boulevard, but they quickly disappear, leaving a situation where the cyclist doesn't know where to go and the driver doesn't know where the cyclist will be. Westwood Boulevard also has very high bus ridership, especially near UCLA and the Westwood Village. However, buses are often stuck in traffic, especially during rush hour. Loading and unloading is also very confusing on Westwood Boulevard and often leads to cars being parked where they shouldn't be. On the right is an image of a sign that a local business created to showcase the problems with loading and unloading on the street. I want to take a minute to talk about how Measure Healthy Streets Los Angeles, or also known as Measure HLA, will affect this project. Back in 2024, Los Angeles voters passed the ballot measure HLA, which requires the city to make upgrades identified in the Mobility Plan 2035 when implementing qualifying street improvements. As part of this project, we will be implementing the identified elements of the Mobility Plan. We are legally required to install these elements. However, the Mobility Plan establishes the minimum required improvements for a street. LADOT has the ability to install elements beyond these designations in response to community input. Here's a helpful diagram to explain the different required elements we need to install as part of this project. On the left is LeConte Avenue. This is the northern section of the project by UCLA. On the right is Exposition, which is the southern end of the project by the E-Line station. Between Ohio and Santa Monica, we need to install protected bike lanes. Between Santa Monica and Exposition, we need to install regular unprotected bike lanes, the kinds you see next to a sidewalk or buffered between parked cars and travel lanes. Between LeConte and Wilshire in the Westwood Village, we need to install full-time bus lanes. These bus lanes will also be available to emergency vehicles such as ambulances, fire trucks, and police vehicles. South of Wilshire, there is no required street elements for transit vehicles. Then the entire project is on the pedestrian enhanced district. What this means is we need to take a close look at the sidewalk and fix severe obstacles to pedestrians, as well as make sure that our crossings and curb ramps are ADA accessible. I would like to reiterate that these are the minimum infrastructure requirements for the project. LADOT can propose elements that go above and beyond this based on what we hear in the community engagement process. Here's a timeline to help better understand where we are in the project today. We've done a little bit of pre-planning back in 2024 and earlier in 2025, where we onboarded a consultant team to assist with this project. We worked out the scope. We also worked on developing some conceptual options to help us better understand what kinds of infrastructure fit on this street. And we've also done a transportation assessment to understand how people currently use the street. We're currently in the first phase of community outreach, where we've been in the community collecting traffic safety concerns and getting the word out about the project. We'll then move on to the design, where we'll incorporate what we heard. Then we'll come back to the community in a second phase of engagement, and we'll begin construction sometime in 2027. Our goal is to complete as much of the project before the Olympics as possible. However, if there are delays, we may need to phase this project before and after the Olympics. Lastly, as with all of our major projects at LADOT, we will conduct an evaluation of the performance of the project, where we will compare data before and after the project to understand things like traffic congestion, safety improvements, and other data points that help us understand how the project is performing. At that time, if we see any problems come up, we can also go back and make changes to improve the project. Now let's talk about how we're approaching community engagement for this project. We start our community engagement by asking residents, commuters, and visitors to Westwood to identify traffic safety issues on the street. We will then analyze all the responses we receive to identify key themes and common issues, and we will draft recommendations for Westwood Boulevard. After we have those recommendations, we'll share that to the public in a second round of community engagement, and then we will take comments on that proposed recommendation and adjust the design based on the responses that we hear. From there, we will develop plans for implementation. We are using a variety of strategies for this first phase of engagement. We've been briefing stakeholders in the community. We have an online survey that we've been using as the main input tool for this phase. We've been posting on social media. We've sent out mailers and put up posters around the neighborhood. We've been hosting community pop ups. We've been canvassing businesses. And we've partnered with SAFE, Streets Are For Everyone, as a community based organization for this project. In the new year, we plan to have an open house to share what we heard. Please sign up for updates on this project to be on the mailing list and receive an invitation for that open house. We want to hear from you. We have three main questions we've been asking the community. Where are you going? How do you get there? And are you facing any safety barriers during your trip? We also want to take into account the needs of the many businesses on Westwood Boulevard. We have specific questions on our survey regarding how customers arrive to these businesses, how do employees arrive to these businesses, and the delivery operations of the businesses. Here's some example safety issues that we want your help to identify on Westwood Boulevard. We want to know where you experience difficult crossing conditions, where you see speeding vehicles, reckless or aggressive driving, drivers failing to yield, a lack of dedicated bicycle space, and issues with loading or unloading and parked cars. We've been out in the community since October, sharing information about the project and receiving community input. We have 3 events left before the end of the year. We are hosting design charrettes. At these design charrettes, you can learn about the project and ask questions. You'll then be able to use 3D blocks of different street elements, including car travel lanes, parking lanes, bus lanes, and bike lanes to design your ideal Westwood Boulevard. Then you'll be able to submit a picture to our project team. In the new year, we will have 2 open houses where we will share what we heard through this engagement process and share our design recommendation. Please make sure to check the About section on our website for the most up-to-date information and to sign up for email updates. Thank you for listening. If you haven't already, please make sure to fill out our survey at the link on the screen. Please make sure to check in periodically to the project website and sign up for updates to get more information as the project continues. If you have any questions, please email us at ladot.active@lacity.org.